Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of Poli Sci-Eye. This is my co-host, Jared, JC Tiger fan. We took a week off, just because I wanted to. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm representing the Tigers today.
Yeah, LSU.
Yeah,
We both went to LSU, by the way. I'd be forgetting I went to LSU.
yeah. Except I'm actually a loyal alum, so I
Yeah,
represent my school.
you've actually been to a game.
Yes, I've been to multiple games. I watched. So
I've
yeah.
never been to one.
Oh God, I had season tickets, so I went. I pretty much every year I went to all but maybe like one home game. So
So you're working on your dissertation still, right?
yes, I'm in the deep process of writing right now.
Are you finished? Or are you close to done?
No, so I'm doing a book form dissertation. So that's essentially I'm writing a book. So,
Why don't you let them know what you're doing?
so I'm working in my PhD. So what the PhD is supposed to for someone in the social science or the humanities, what you're supposed to be able to show when you're done is that you are an expert on a topic or a number of topics. So the way that you kind of signal or show that you have mastered a subject matter, and you can actually contribute something new to it, is you write a dissertation. So every field is going to be different. But in political science, typically people write book length projects. So it's pretty customary for a dissertation to be 200, 300 pages on a topic or a couple of topics that you spend years researching. So it takes so long because you're having to write and then you read something and then you have to amend what you wrote before and you have to edit and revise and you add stuff. It's just a very long
It
process.
sounds so much fun.
I mean, if you're super nerdy or if there's like a handful of things you just want to know so much about, then it can be really fun, but it can also be really frustrating sometimes. It's also very isolating because you kind of work by yourself all the time. So
right. What's your dissertation topic?
Oh God, how much time do you have?
Well, a little topic you can just say like it's multiple topics or something.
No, it's one topic. So essentially, what my dissertation on it's. I'm going to give you the short answer. So essentially, what I'm looking at is the kind of thinking about what happened at the end of what we think of as the end of the civil rights movement. So 1968 is kind of viewed as kind of this year where everything just kind of went to shit. But essentially, I am looking at the concept of neoliberalism and how that ultimately impacted the civil rights movement and racial equality, kind of just more broadly. So it's very much a kind of historical project. So I read a lot of old texts from like the 50s and 60s to try to think about, how Black folks were kind of thinking about what they thought racial justice was, and also reading a lot of texts from politicians and really powerful figures to get a sense of what they thought about the American economic order, and trying to just essentially put those things in conversation with one another so we can kind of understand better kind of what happened at the end of the 60s.
Huh. So when you mention neoliberalism, are you a neoliberal?
No, I'm adamantly against neoliberalism, although I will say that I think many of us end up being neoliberals, even if we don't know it.
I probably think I am one, maybe. I don't know. I want to know, what is your stance, just so no one is confused?
What is my stance on?
Like, what is your political
I'm
side?
So I would say I'm a what some people call a Black Marxist. So I tend to think of
a Black Marxist.
Yeah. So I think of so I consider myself on the left. So usually people who identify as Black Marxists are usually anti-capitalism. They are obviously anti-prison, which I talked about last episode. We're also anti-empire, so we're against perpetual warfare and all of those things that are common in American culture. We're anti just the commodification of life. So we don't think that everything should have a price tag on it. We think some things should just be guaranteed, like everyone should have access to somewhere, a safe place to live, access to clean water, access to just a general, decent quality of life. So these are kind of foundational things that Black Marxists believe.
And one more thing, since you said Black Marxists, the movie that's coming out, I think Judas and the Black Messiah, does that have anything to do with Black Marxism?
So some of the Black Panthers did very much read a lot of Marxist literature. So some of them did, in fact, avowedly identify as Black Marxists, but many of them had similar ideals. They were very much anti-capitalist, anti-empire, anti kind of corporatism, and all those other things. And so I think that's so funny because I saw on Twitter that people were joking that, I saw Jay-Z was doing a song for the soundtrack.
Oh,
And people were like, most of the Black Panthers would essentially side-eye Jay-Z because he was completely antithetical to most of them didn't believe that Black capitalism could save Black people. So, and Jay-Z is kind of
it's like the whole foundation of Jay-Z's like lyrics.
Yeah, exactly. So so people were kind of, ripping the soundtrack for that because they're just like, you got Jay-Z to be on the soundtrack representing this radical figure who was very much anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and all these other things. So
I might have to check that movie out.
yeah, that's interesting. I always have suspicions about the way Hollywood treats these historical moments, but I mean, it looks interesting.
Look, I just saw Malcolm and Marie. I need something to wash my mind out. But let's get into our topic. So a couple episodes ago, we talked about Stacey Abrams and how some people might deify political figures, meaning like, oh, they can do no wrong, or we put them on this pedestal. Even like their values might not even fall in line with ours. It's just what we think they, represent. So I wanted to know like about some political figures that, Republicans always go to, Democrats always go to. So we chose 3 political figures that are deified in the political community, in like the Senate, the House, Capitol Hill, etc. First one is, I think both Republicans and Democrats both deify as Abraham Lincoln. Like, oh, we're the party of Lincoln. Like, we would never do this. Or Abraham Lincoln once said, like I hear that a lot. Like, we always go to Abraham Lincoln. Now, I'm going to ask you 3 questions for each political figure. First, I want to know, how do you think they got this status? Then, is it warranted? And what is something from their legacy that was actually positive?
Okay.
We'll start with, how did Abraham Lincoln even get to this status, you think?
Yeah. So for the Republican Party, it makes sense why they would cling to Lincoln as kind of the figure that they want to deify, because for pretty much most of modern history, the Republican Party has been kind of viewed as the racist party. Well, I wouldn't say since modern, I would say pretty much after the Civil War, the Republican Party essentially took on kind of this racist kind of imprimatur. But so it's important to remember, though, Black people were not decidedly Democrat really until after Franklin Roosevelt was elected. So a lot of Black people actually really, really, really supported Blacks who could vote. Obviously, a lot of Black people in the South couldn't vote because of Jim Crow, but Blacks in the North, a lot of them supported the Republican Party primarily because of Abraham Lincoln. So Republicans like to point out that, Lincoln was the president that freed the slaves, because it kind of helps them to wash away the charges of being the racist party. On the Democratic side, I think Democrats are generally always presenting themselves as the party of racial equality and racial justice and all those things. And I think Lincoln, probably more so than any other president, kind of embodies kind of this is the president of, racial justice, because the Emancipation Proclamation.
Right.
So I think that's how you end up with both parties trying to essentially lay claim to the legacy of Lincoln. And then most Americans just generally don't have a very good reading of political history generally. So I think he becomes a figure that's easily able to be caricatured.
So you think it's warranted, like what he's done?
So Lincoln's a fascinating figure because even though he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, a lot of people point to that as being like, oh, Lincoln just loved Black folks. Like he just wanted to, dap it up with Black people, freedom for all. But really, he was way more ambivalent than that. So like he kind of viewed slavery as, he didn't really liked the institution, but it wasn't because he just thought the institution was just so wrong. Like really, Lincoln was more so, I guess he had issues with the institution because of the problems that it presented with kind of developing the country. So he recognized that it was a very politically contentious issue. He didn't really oppose it because he just thought it was just such a morally wrong thing. In fact, there is actual evidence of him saying essentially like, you know, we're going to end slavery. I don't think that Black people can really be incorporated. So we just need to send them, you know, back to Africa or to Haiti or somewhere else. But you know, they just don't need to be here. So I think that kind of gets lost in translation, is that although he did evolve later in his life before he's assassinated, but for much of the Civil War, he was very much, we just need to get rid of it so I can keep this nation together. But it wasn't because I just love Black folks. And in fact, he got approached many times by Frederick Douglass, who was really kind of or tried to be the moral compass for Lincoln and helping him to understand like why slavery needed to be abolished. But for Lincoln, many of his motivations were almost strictly political. Some people might think it doesn't really matter what he thought, like he still issued it, but you know, I think when you deify people, you don't really get to look at them as like a nuanced figure.
Right, you're not allowed to like criticize them.
Exactly. Obviously, like you can't undersell the Emancipation Proclamation. Like it was a very seminal moment in American history. It's not as though when he issued that, like everybody that was enslaved was suddenly, you know, able to, you know, frolic around and live as a free person. Like there was still a lot of racial violence, and slavery still in a lot of places still continued well after that. So yeah, you have to put these things in context.
So it was just like a political convenience for Lincoln?
I wouldn't say a political convenience, but it definitely was a political decision for sure. Now, whether or not you think of being a political decision in and of itself is a problem, that he did it because it was out of political motivations and not because he just thought it was the right thing to do, we can debate that. But I think
that's what I'm like.
Yeah, but I think it's important to like not deify people for that very reason, so we can actually dig in and try to understand what was kind of going on behind the scenes. But again, like you can't dismiss it because it obviously was a very important moment. But at the same time, like we can't just take that at face value and say that, oh, he did this just because he loved Black folks. Like it was more than that.
So next up, number 2 is Ronald Reagan. I feel like they always mention this man's name, and I'm not even in the politics like that, obviously. And they always mention his wife too. Is his wife still with us?
No, Nancy died maybe about 5 or 6 years ago.
Oh, okay, so they're both gone. Oh,
yeah, both went on to glory, or somewhere else. I don't know where they went.
Down there. Why do you think Ronald Reagan got his status with Republicans?
So Reagan's an interesting figure. So I think to really understand Reagan, you have to understand where America was when he was elected. So Reagan was elected in 1980. And the 1970s, especially the late 70s, was a really kind of tumultuous kind of period in American history economically. So there was an energy shortage. So gas was really hard to come by. It was really expensive. There was an inflation crisis. So the cost of everything was just going through the roof. Jimmy Carter was kind of seen, was the president who preceded Reagan. He was kind of viewed as kind of this aloof, you know, wasn't firm against the Soviet Union and our enemies. And, you know, Reagan comes in, you know, and runs this campaign his actual campaign slogan was "Make America Great Again." So Reagan.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So Reagan kind of wrote the script for 45 to essentially.
And he was a celebrity too, right?
Yeah. So he used to be an actor. He was a C-list actor. He wasn't like a Clint Eastwood, but he was an actor. He was actually the president of SAG, so the Screen Actors Guild. So he was head of back in like the 50s. But Reagan had a reputation of being an avowed racist. Like he was so racist in the 50s and 60s that the Republican Party then was like, keep him away. Like we don't want him anywhere near our party because he's avowedly racist, which just goes to show how racist the Republican Party has gotten.
I feel like we've gotten like a full circle moment.
Yes. Pretty much, yeah. And so again, so thinking about when Reagan was elected, like Carter was the president, and there were all these things going on, and people thought he was weak on foreign policy, and Carter gave this speech where he essentially told the American people, like, look, like climate change is real, energy crisis is real. We need to actually start thinking about the way we consume so we can actually have a sustainable planet and keep it safe. I mean, he was doing climate change before climate change was climate change.
Jimmy Carter.
In fact, he even put solar panels on top of the White House to like signal to people how serious this was. And people didn't like that, mainly white people, but people thought it was weak. They didn't want to see America confront issues of consumption and having to sacrifice and all of these things. And so when Reagan runs, he runs as this America fuck yeah president. And that really resonated with a lot of people, mainly white people who felt like they had status loss and things of that nature. And so the reason I think that he becomes this deified figure is because he kind of put on this kind of this show of America is always exceptional. We're always going to be at the top of the heap. You can't criticize America because it's perfect. This is the country that everyone wants to aspire to. And so
that what you would call imperialism?
So he was very much an imperialist in the sense that he thought that America should exert its power everywhere. In fact, the military budget exploded under Reagan. So, and also, if you can't forget, Reaganomics. So he comes into office, and literally one of the first things he does is he slashes taxes for corporations and rich people. So if you're a business owner, if you are aspired to move up the corporate ladder, like it makes sense why you would love Reagan. He slashed your taxes by like 50%. So, and many Republicans are pro-business, low taxes, small government, all those things. So Reagan very much was ideologically aligned to that business class. And he, of course, threw some red meat to other white people who wanted to feel good about being an American again. So I think on the right, I think that all kind of came together to create this figure that the right just has enshrined in political history. I think he would have been more of a critiqued figure had he not immediately fallen ill when he left office. So he announced he had Alzheimer's almost within a year or two after he left office. So I think people kind of gave him even people like Democrats, I think gave him a little bit of grace because they're like, oh, the guy has Alzheimer's, he's going to die anyway. So you know how people feel about death and stuff. So I think that absent on the left and in liberal critique, I think all you had was kind of the echo chamber of right-wing people who just idolized him.
He served for 8 years?
Yeah, 2 terms. The first term, he demolished Carter. I think Carter won maybe 4 states in D.C., which is crazy because he was the incumbent president. He got demolished. And then in 1984, Reagan won every single state except 1. So he swept both times. So this was a complete transformation and we're still in a lot of ways living in the ruins of the Reagan administration.
Right, because it was a detriment for Black people.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, and it's not funny actually, it's actually really terrible. After he cut taxes, the next year, like the budget deficit exploded. And all of his economic advisors were like, okay, we don't have any money for these social programs and, welfare and things that people need, or people unemployment claims and stuff like that. So just to show how ruthless he was, he actually brought a knife to when he signed this bill cutting welfare and unemployment benefits and all these things that was going to disproportionately affect Black people. He brought a knife to the bill signing ceremony to show how he was cutting all of the fat in American government, despite the fact that he'd already cut taxes for rich people. So he was very open about what he was doing. Like he didn't hold back any punches. Like he didn't try to pull one over on people. Like he was very adamant about what he was trying to accomplish. One of his biggest blunders was that he did not acknowledge the AIDS epidemic until about a year before he left office. So throughout the whole 80s, AIDS is like ravaging, like New York's hospitals were essentially how they were during COVID. Like people were dying in the street and spilling over, and Reagan refused to acknowledge that AIDS was even a thing until Fauci actually was still the head of the NIH and eventually came to him and was like, look, we have to do something about this epidemic. Like, it is ravaging communities. And he finally, begrudgingly, said something. But again, it wasn't until like he was out the door. So all this time he could have been investing and spending money on research and development, and he refused to do any of it.
Who was president after him?
George H.W. Bush. So,
oh man. And he was president for 8 years too, right?
Only 4. So he was
Four,
on
Clinton.
And then Clinton in 92.
I'm not a political person. He is.
I'm supposed to say one good thing about Reagan. I've really been trying to wreck my brain thinking about one good thing about Reagan. I would say if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a business person, if you aspire to move up the corporate ladder, you can thank Reagan for low taxes and a business-friendly environment, because we've been living kind of in that era since he's been president. So if that's your thing, then I will say he definitely made it easier for people who have a lot of money to generate more wealth. So
okay, that's a good positive. I mean, I thought you were just gonna say, well, he's dead.
I'm trying to be, somebody out there. We got some black capitalists out here, so that's your thing.
No, it's fine. So moving on, and I think I have to write a disclaimer about this one. This is our final one, and we saved the best for last because I feel like liberals and black people have deified this person. And of course, as you know, it is President Barack Obama. Now, I love Obama, so please do not get into the comments and be reckless. We love Obama. He's a great person.
Well, who is I part of this we, or is
you get? Well, I love Barack Obama, okay? But, we all know, like, let's admit that he was a conservative liberal, like a very conservative liberal. I'll say that. So, of course, we know that, like, I guess I'm more familiar with Barack Obama, so I can speak more on it. So, like, how did he get his status? I'm guessing just, like, he just inspires me when I hear him speak. So that's why I love him so much. I think, I love his family. I love what he stands for. So maybe I don't really look into the political part so much because it's just the outside. He just seems like such a dynamic individual. Like, he's one of the celebrities that I want to meet in my lifetime.
He seems like, he seems like a very nice, a great dad, a wonderful husband, a very gracious person. On all of those things, I agree. I think he's a very captivating speaker. In fact, I remember he gave a speech maybe a week before the election. He was stumping for Biden, and he gave the speech in the rain. And I was like, this guy he just has it. Like, he just is very charismatic. Like, his timing is amazing. Like, he just has it. Like, and so I think it is important to recognize that he is immensely gifted as an orator, as a speaker. That being said,
right.
I think it's also important to think about context. So similar to Reagan, Obama came of age as a political figure during a time where people had generally grown disenchanted with the Bush administration. So people were tired of the endless wars. We had this crazy recession.
Katrina.
Exactly, yeah. So people were just generally tired of the recklessness, just the complete ineptitude of the Bush administration. And you come along and people felt generally hopeless, like they didn't know what was going on. I mean, Bush entered the presidency as a figure that was already contested because people didn't believe that he should have been president in the first place. So you couple that with all these wars, Katrina, the economic crisis, like you can go down the laundry list of things, and people are just fed up with Bush. And they also didn't have hope. So you have this figure who enters politics, who is very much about hope and change and doing all of these things to kind of reform politics and, in Washington as we know it. And couple that with the fact that he's very gifted as a speaker. And so I can see how he inspires people.
And he's black.
And so also Obama came of age during an era where social media, this is probably the first president, not probably, this was the first president where social media had really become a thing. So he really leveraged Twitter. He obviously, like, Facebook had become somewhat of a thing then. So the internet generally had become a much bigger factor in political campaigning. So I think that coupled with all of these other things made him kind of this figure. Now, his actual policies, I think we have a little bit of critical distance now to actually look at them kind of for what they are. So let's look at his crowning achievement. So the Affordable Care Act. I don't think you can undersell the fact that he was able to get that bill passed. People have been trying to reform the healthcare system since FDR. So FDR, Social Security started under FDR. Truman tried to pass healthcare reform, failed. Johnson successfully able to successfully pass Medicare and Medicaid, but after that, complete failures. So Clinton famously tried to do it, failed. So I think it's important to understand that what he was able to do with healthcare was really big. That being said, like, it was still a bill that was very much crafted in tandem with pharmaceuticals, with insurance companies, with hospitals, and so on. And so a lot of the issues that we still face with our healthcare system are in a lot of ways a result of some of the policies that happened with the Affordable Care Act. And so I think it's important to think about it nuanced. Like, yes, it was great that he was able to pass it, but let's actually look at the bill and what it does. And there's some good things, like people being able to stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26 was great. But there's still a lot of, it could have gone further, I should say. And it didn't. So some people say, was that him just compromising for the sake of compromising, or did he get what he could? And all of these other questions. And so then on foreign policy, I would say the biggest issue that people have with Obama, especially people on the left, is that he completely expanded the drone program far beyond what Bush was doing in the Middle East and in Western Asia. So while people on the left critiqued Bush for engaging all these acts of warfare and so on, Obama in a lot of ways expanded a lot of the programs that had already begun under Bush. He said he was going to close Guantanamo Bay. He didn't. And so there's a number of questions about his foreign policy that people on the left and some liberals will say, well, he just expanded the empire. Like in some ways, he was just as imperialistic as Bush was. And so, even I haven't read his memoir, but I did see someone posting an excerpt on Twitter, and essentially he admitted that there were a lot of things that he simply didn't do because he was still living under Reagan's shadow in the way that Reagan. So again, you remember I told you that Reagan expanded defense or spent tons of money on building the Department of Defense while he was president and kind of setting the foundation for this imperial system. And also he, in a lot of ways, essentially created the condition where business just has so much control over everything. Obama essentially admitted that he was operating under the Reagan ideology in some sense. And so the thing about Obama is that I think that it gets hard for people is because they want to believe that he wants to do great things, but it's just constrained by politics. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I necessarily buy the whole constraint argument, because there are a number of times when I think Obama wasn't constrained and he still didn't do. So, or for instance, like after he left office, like there are a number of times where he could have state positions and he just didn't, or he would chastise protesters and things like that. And so, we have this notion that he's this radical figure, but even when he's not in the public eye or in public office, like he still takes these very like conservative positions. So I'm kind of someone shows you who they are, believe them. Right. But I think for a lot of Black people, it's tricky because, we want to believe that the first Black president was this amazing figure. In some ways, he was amazing for what he was able to do. But I think if we really want to understand like his presidency kind of in its totality, I think we have to be a little bit more willing to put aside like, that's my president, and actually look at the policies, which is hard to do. I understand that.
Well, what frustrated me was like he came into office with all blue Senate, all blue House. Like I felt like he could have did more, but he didn't.
He's admitted as much. So it's also important to remember that Obama was pretty much a political neophyte. So he had only been in the Senate for, a couple of years before he started running for president. And so he didn't really have much political experience in Washington as it was. And so he has admitted that he kind of came in naive and thinking that, bipartisanship and working across the aisle and unity and all of those other things would work. So on one hand, I don't really fault him for trying because he kind of ran as the unity president. But I do think he kind of spent too much time trying, especially after Mitch McConnell was on the record saying like his chief aim as Senate minority leader was to make Obama a one-term president. I'm like, after he said that shit, like I would have been done. Like he told you what he was doing.
Right.
And he kind of kept trying to make this unity thing work. So yeah, and so I think it's important to just try to think about Obama as kind of this nuanced figure. I think some ways it's kind of hard to do because he is such a compelling social figure. And so I think it's hard for a lot of people to kind of not be swept into Obama and kind of just view him as Obama.
I think you went a little easy on Obama. Like I was a little scared. I was just like, okay, what is he going to say? Because I mean, so I've heard people call him a war criminal.
I mean, I think you can make that case. I guess my whole thing is I'm trying to think about if you're actually trying to reach people who I know. I'm sure many people in your audience are Obama fans. So I'm just trying to, I don't want to turn people off. People will call him a war criminal and they'll call him spineless and this, that, and the other. Most of my leftist comrades go to town on Obama. And to be clear, I don't really like hardly any of his policies. I think that he was way too favorable for Wall Street. I think especially when he came into office and the first thing he did with the whole like bailout, like I think he was way too generous to Wall Street people. In fact, there's some kind of behind the scenes receipts from him talking to some of the executives on Wall Street and telling them, hey, like I'm on your side, like just, let me kind of do this for you. And so he definitely had a very kind of overly warm relationship with a lot of these Wall Street folks. I don't think we can discount that. Right. But I'm trying to give some good stuff. I'm trying to get some, be real.
Well, yeah. Thank you for being objective, I guess. I still don't want you to hold back just because of my audience. They're learning just how I am, I think.
Yeah. Now, one thing I will tell people is we have to learn how to separate Obama, the political figure, from Obama, we've turned him into a celebrity.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he came of age during a time when social media was really kind of developing. But we really have to, and this is hard to do because we're always so enmeshed in kind of this culture of celebrity. This is a big problem, period. The culture of celebrity needs to be abolished.
Of course. That's why Trump was president.
Yeah, it's taking.
That's why Kim K is the most popular person on this planet.
It's why Britney is where she is right now. Like, is why Amy Winehouse is no longer with us. There is just so many reasons why the culture of celebrity needs to be done with. But especially for political figures, we really, 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 really have to figure out how to get some critical distance between who they were as political figures and just because we like them because that was our president. Like, I get it, young Jeezy was onto something, but you gotta find a way.
Now, we have like 5 minutes left. So let's just talk about what's currently going on. The impeachment trial, which I'm kind of watching right now. This evidence is just hilarious. Well, not hilarious, but it's just hilarious how they have receipt after receipt after receipt. Like, he said this at this time while this was happening. Like, the evidence is insurmountable. I don't get, like, why are we even having a trial right now? Like, he did it. He did that. How many votes do we need in the Senate to, like, convict him?
I'm pretty sure it's 60. Not positive, but I'm pretty sure.
Oh, so they can do it with 51.
You'd have to siphon off some more Republican votes. I think there were, 6 Republicans who agreed to, I think he only needed a simple majority to actually move forward with the actual trial. But I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure you need 60. So they'd have to siphon off a few more Republicans to agree with conviction, which I wouldn't hang my hat on that happening. Mainly because they're just too chicken shit. Like, they know that their electoral prospects are still very much kind of reliant on Trumpism. And so I don't think he's going to be convicted because I just don't have enough faith in, Republicans to do what should be done. So we'll see. I mean, I wouldn't hold my breath, but if some of y'all, my grandmother used to say, I'm not holding my breath because I'm too young to die, but
Well, there you have it. So that was our show, y'all. Where can they follow you on social media and the like? And do you have a book recommendation for this episode?
I would recommend this book. It's called Fatal Invention. It is about why we essentially need to rethink what we believe, what information we think we're getting when we do these 23andMe's and all of these situations. What this is telling us is not really what we think it's telling us. It's not telling us anything about race, for instance. Yeah, there's a very provocative argument in this book being made about thinking really carefully about what we're trying to get when we want to, trace our ancestry. So I would recommend this to anyone who has gotten a 23andMe, is thinking about it, or what's the other ones? What's the 23andMe? What's the other one?
Ancestry.
Yeah, that. So yeah, anybody who's considering doing that, I would definitely recommend reading this. So Janina, if you're watching, I put one out there for Dorothy Roberts. That's our girl.
Where can they follow you?
Yes, so I am on Twitter or Instagram, JAYC Tiger Fan.
And of course, you can follow me, Instagram, Twitter, CDIGGI1. And make sure y'all like, comment, and subscribe. And share the fucking video, please. I know someone needs to know what, we talking about politics. Let's discuss it. Anywho, I will see y'all next week or the week after. I don't know. All right. Bye.